Ready to go? Yes, okay. I now call the meeting reconvened at 6:30 p.m. Before we begin, does any committee member wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest?
Have one.
Okay.
I'd like to declare a potential conflict of interest. My wife is a employee of the city. She works as the museum curator.
Now we want roll call. Does anybody else have any?
Okay, roll call. Member Swartzler.
Present.
Member Source. Member Roden. Present. Member Boisvert. Member Martin Lewis.
Here.
Member Morton.
Present.
Member Court.
Here.
Chair Garrison.
Here.
Member Porter. Here. Member Sharman.
Here.
Member Seiler. Here. Member Praskavas.
Here.
Member Christensen.
Here.
Member Harkinen.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Now we're gonna move on to public comment. You have received this one comment card. So we wish to hear public comment on the proposed budget. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes in length and remember to state your name and address for the records. First one I have is from Mitch Teal.
Hello, everybody. I've talked to several of you outside of this room about, what my concern is the 4th of July, 2022. And, I just want to give you my thoughts from my corner down there on Main Street. Is that the 4th of July is super important to Independence. It brings a ton of people who've never been here before and making a first impression. So I'm hoping that we can really work something out. It's important for my business, it's important for Main Street. But I think it's important for Independence as a whole. I'm sure that it loads up a hotel, it loads up Airbnbs around here. It probably doesn't do a ton of business. So kind of my thoughts on it, just to throw out what my thoughts on this is that it doesn't need to be what it is now. It can be much smaller and it can still attract a ton of people. So now I think it's growing into this great thing when there was money available to, you know, a big thing in the park and you know, gates all around it, the beer garden and big bands and all of that. I think now when we use our budget constraints, that we could probably do it much smaller scale. Things in the park that don't interfere or lessen the business of Main Street. So, you know, I have a lot of food vendors out there. I know food vendors make money for the park, for the event, but I think that would be way offset by how much money would be spent on Main Street and not leave town when the event's over. And you wouldn't have to have the fence, you wouldn't have to have a beer garden, all those people get, I sell beer, conflict of interest. But I think, you know, people would come over there and, you know, and go to my place a lot more. I also think that, you know, if they have a band still, that maybe not a headliner band, people just want to go and have a good time, hear some music, watch some fireworks. I also think we have the best fireworks in Oregon. And we have for a long time. You expect that, but we don't have to. We can, people just love fireworks. So, another proposal I had, I know this year going forward, next year is the one that we're concerned about. Maybe we shoot off half the fireworks this year. And we save half for next year to kind of offset the expense of someone who's gonna step in and take over for this. You know, because I know the fireworks are probably a majority of the cost, although I haven't looked at the budget for that. But I know it's a huge expense. But if we could just have a couple bounty houses and a band out there and then save on all the rest of the expenses. I know there would be a deficit that we have to come up with, and I don't have a plan for that. But it wouldn't be the huge deficit and the huge amount of time that it takes the city and volunteers to put together to make it work the way it is now. So, I think smaller would be much better and would not affect the experience that much. That's what I think.
Chair, can I ask?
Yeah, I don't.
Generally,
Good time.
don't, but it is up to the chair and.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for your testimony, Mitch. Do you have a rough estimation of how much increase in business you see on the 4th of July during the festival that we have?
Yes, and it depends on when it lands, but it can generally be, you know, by far my best weekend is on a weekend, by far, like triple, but I've been slammed the entire time. So I think either way, small or bigger, I'd be slammed the whole time. So I think it wouldn't affect me as much as it would affect a lot of other people on Main Street if they were able to neighbor to those, without a fence.
But roughly 3 times.
About 3 times the amount.
Thank you. I think it's fair.
That's good. And then for the record, can you state your name and address?
Mitch Teal, my business address is 211 Main Street.
Thank you.
And we did receive one comment via email, which has been distributed to all the members.
Not be read it for record. Oh, we don't need to do that. It is included in the packet and it will be a part of the record.
And it's on the website.
I believe we just received it. Myra will.
Well,
Website.
All right, and there are no other public comments, then we'll move on to the budget presentation. So staff will now present information from general funds, departments, and other funds.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll go ahead and start off with the general fund revenue situation and sort of a summary of the general fund. And then we'll move into the individual department presentations. So on page 21 of your budget document, there is a summary of the general fund, summary of total sources, summary of total uses. And that brings me to, I guess, let me step back. You did receive tonight in your spot, the crosswalk of the amendments that were made last meeting. Well, guess what? I got another one. So it's also there in front of you. It's marked, there's a column there that's marked Amendment 2. The personal service, public safety fee of $360,000 was inadvertently included in both general revenues and police revenues for 24-25 estimates. So we need an amendment to beginning balance and contingency in 25-26 to reduce beginning balance and reduce contingency by that 360,000. So, but we can come back to that here after I cover the revenues if you like. I just wanted to make sure you saw that. So the general fund proposed budget there, the far right-hand column shows you that we were beginning with a balance of $1,001,400. That actually, after the amendment, is $776,000 and change. Total revenues to this general fund primarily are recorded in what we call our non-departmental because they're general revenues and affect the whole fund. That's about $5.5 million. Police revenues are just under $1 million, and that includes the public safety fee that's proposed for next year. Everything else is kind of in line, and we'll talk about some of these as we go through the individual departments. Uses, you'll see totals by department. That's the way we budget in the general fund. And again, we'll cover these in more detail as we go through the specific departments. Specific revenues to the general fund on page 22. Property taxes, again, pretty close to 3% estimated increase over the current year. Franchise fees are consistent with 24-25. Intergovernmental revenues, there's a slight decline based on the estimates that we get from League of Oregon Cities. Things like liquor tax, cigarette tax, those things are trending downward slightly over time. Some of the permits and fees you'll see are consistent with 24-25 after we make that adjustment for the public safety fee. Miscellaneous revenues, you'll see an item down there under 25-26 for $250,000. That is an estimated sale of one of the park properties. And then the transfers in are the amounts from the sewer, water, and storm drain for their franchise fee payments to the general. Any questions on any of that? Okay,
Yeah, yes, please. The. Just a second here. I had a question about this. I think it's under license permits and fees.
yes,
It was 360,000 estimated for year end, but only 1,000.
correct, and that's the mistake I was just talking about,
Okay,
that we're correcting. It was included in both places,
gotcha.
and we'll see it again over into the. under the police
And
department.
also, on the general fund statement, how do we raise 170,000 in IT and 220,000 in building permits?
Guaranteed.
Yeah, so we are in the process of, cooperatively working with Monmouth to provide IT services as a part of a team.
Okay.
Our IT director will, lead the team. He will work with Monmouth to hire an additional person, and you'll see that on the IT side. This is the funding that would come in from Monmouth to cover those expenses, and then part of his time as well.
Okay,
And the $220,000 in the building department is an estimate of the fees that we'll collect based on our collective estimate of development
okay.
activity.
And the reason I asked was because it was significantly more than last year.
Right,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Good, okay. Oh, she
I
moved
had
it
all
home.
the same, I had all the same
Okay.
questions, so.
I am trying to
I thought I
watch the
heard it over
phone.
here, I swear.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and cover the administration department. So there's really not a lot different here, other than you will see in the personnel services, the amount that's budgeted is significantly less than in 24-25 budget. And again, that's a result of our allocation of costs across the funds programs. What we did is in the 24-25 year, if it was not allocated to another fund, it was left in the administration department. But in an effort to better show where the city manager and the city reporter spend their time, we went ahead and allocated that across departments within the general fund as well. So, for example, and you'll see this with HR and with finance, all of them. If they spend time supporting the police department, a portion of their salaries and benefits have been allocated to the police department, even though it's still in the general fund. Make sense? And on page 108, there in the appendices, there is a schedule that shows all of those allocations. Committee member Rogan?
Yeah, I thought we did that last year as well. We split it up amongst departments. So you're saying we did not do that last year?
We didn't split it across departments within the general fund. We split it across funds. So,
That was where we were lacking transparency before, but you're saying it's all cleared on page 1.
yes, ma'am.
And each year, remember from our discussion last year, each year it will change. Because what we do is we look back and we look forward. So, for me, we know I'll be doing a lot in water because of the water infrastructure and the sewer infrastructure. So mine are adjusted just a little bit from last year, knowing I'm gonna be doing more of something this year. Sean, taking on new responsibilities, he's across funds, so that number will change every year because we are adjusting it every single year to make sure that we always look at it, we don't stay stagnant, we don't inadvertently charge too much to one fund versus another, just because we didn't do a deep dive and forecast.
How much is that going to raise utility costs for residents?
Not,
I couldn't hear the
how
question.
much would it raise utility costs?
There's no impact on utility costs.
So.
Oh, I thought you meant electricity.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. I got you. It's just, it's part of. I guess I didn't do a comparison of what it was last year versus what it was this year in terms of impact on the water fund, sewer fund, storm drain funds.
Okay,
I haven't done that analysis.
Right, but it won't change rates.
Right, it doesn't change rates.
Right, all it does is it allocates fairly and appropriately across all funds as opposed to putting it all into the general fund. Even though you know that we work for water and we work for sewer.
So I noticed, I think I know what the answer is, but I just want to clarify. So I noticed that for all the departments, there is a line item for rent and lease payments, but I'm assuming that the city owns all of the buildings in which we
Yeah.
operate out of. Is
No,
that
it's an excellent question,
allocation?
thank you, and during our discussions at the staff level, when Chair Garrison and committee member Guavera were there. They suggested maybe we find a different title for that line item, because what it really is copier leases, equipment leases. We do own all of our own property, we're not renting property outside. So, but that's what it is, and the reason it's called that is really more of an accounting convention, so when we do our financial reporting, it fits nicely into the package.
Gotcha, thank you for that.
Yeah. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I'm gonna be full of it tonight. Be aware.
That's all right.
I had one more question to ask on the general fund. I see franchises on there. Does MyNet pay franchises?
That's a great question. I believe they do. Yes, I'm told.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's it for now.
Thank you. All right, let's take a quick look at the administration department then on pages 25 and 26. And again, the only major differences here are variations from the prior year. You'll see that line 63,130 for audit went up a bit. That's contract increase, price increases for the audit. They don't do it for the same price every year. And then you'll see some reductions on page 26, the last couple of lines over there for community support and mayor council costs. Those are reduced basically just in ways of trying to find reductions and ways to try and squeeze the budget wherever we could. That's all I really have on the administrative department, unless Ken wants to add something else. Okay. Sorry, City Manager West.
I do have a question. Can you go over dues and memberships? I noticed that there's
Yeah.
significant costs.
Yeah, so the amount, and I don't have in front of me the specific amounts for each, but the dues and memberships line item is an accumulation of things in the administration department, things like bar association dues, the city recorder's membership dues in a couple of different organizations that she's in. Those things, as well as the administrative department's share of software subscription costs.
Which is bulk.
And that's the big number. And that's why it's big in every department, because we share costs for things like Zoom and Microsoft license fees. And I
And
think
Jason could tell you a lot.
our IT director could probably list those out for you if you really wanted to know. But
Thank you, that helps, because yes, the software makes a lot of sense. At first, I was thinking it's just professional association.
thank you.
I assume we pay dues to like the League of Oregon City.
Yes, that's where that is too.
Okay, and we pay dues for all the licenses. I mean, I saw the bar, but all the licenses that our staff is required to carry and all those things. Those are part of the way that this is, we pay those dues for them.
Yes, sir.
Does LOC is included in that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is there deliberately no contingency in the administration fund?
Yes, because it's not a fund. It's a department. The contingency for the general fund, you'll see when we get back to that page.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Flip the page over to the finance department. I am fairly well versed in this one. So, there's only a couple, three things that I want to really cover, or bring to your attention. One is in personnel services, we did budget for a transition in the finance director position during the 25-26 fiscal year. As most of you know, I'm leaving in December, at the end of December. And so we've allowed for a very short overlap with whoever we're able to recruit into that position to allow for some transition there. So that's what that cost is about. And then with the rent and lease payments, we simply didn't budget for that last year. We missed that. And so that's why there's an increase this year, because we should have budgeted for it. And then down under professional services, other, that $10,000 there, $2,000 is kind of just a general thing. The rest of it is to provide for to pay the audit firm to actually draft our financial statements next year, just to allow that to occur, because we learned this year, we really didn't have the capacity to do it, and it slowed down a lot of other things. So we're gonna take advantage of an opportunity there. Any questions on the finance department? They're all being very kind. No coffee for this group. I like it. All right, human resources, then I'll turn it over to our human resources director.
I guess I do have a question.
Sure.
And it looks like it's pretty consistent across, so I'll just ask it once. Big increase in the cost of benefits, that's passed on by the state and you all have no control over that, correct?
So part of that is the allocation that you'll see, so it'll be up and down in some. But yeah, there were significant increases in health insurance premiums again this year. And because it's an odd numbered year, this is the year that the new PERS rates kick in.
Right.
And there was increases in the PERS rates.
We're seeing that at the university as well.
Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Good evening. I'm Amanda, the HR director here at the city. So in front of you, I've got the human resource budget. Overall, you're not going to see a huge change in most of the areas. The areas you're going to see the changes in is going to be legal and recruitment. So recruitment is, Rob stated, we're going to be looking for a new public works director in the next year, a new finance director. We also are going to have to fill some IT positions, and we're going to have to look at options bigger than just local for those positions, because they are more dynamic positions. And then with legal, those fees are always going up. We want to make sure that we're protected from any potential litigation, that kind of thing. Any questions? I'm easy.
When you say that the positions are dynamic, does that mean you're not gonna hire in-house for public works? You are going to look outside?
So we will look outside. So with all of our director positions, we do look outside just the organization, because we will look inside, as we did with our chief position, but it was open to more than just internal candidates. So we will open it up to more than just internal candidates, yes.
Can you give me a rough idea of why it costs $18,000 to recruit people?
It just depends. So that's a great question. So if I have to hire a recruiter that specializes in public works and or specializes in a finance director, those numbers are a lot higher than normal. Obviously, if we can do this all in-house and I can find the best public works director out there without having to go out, I will. But it's a matter of it can cost upwards to 10,000 a piece-ish to find somebody.
And if we have a budget shortfall of $750,000 this year, isn't that something we just insist you do?
Well, unfortunately, it's not a matter of insisting, it's a matter of there are not enough public works directors, there are not enough finance directors. So we will be competing with a lot of other cities, counties, and jurisdictions, which means having one person handle it, there's simply not the capacity. We have to do we're probably gonna have to do a recruitment firm in order to find the best candidates. We were blessed 2 years ago, almost, when Rob agreed to come out of retirement to help us. That is unusual. We were just lucky that he likes us and he grew up here, so.
But you're not insisting that whoever gets picked for public works has an engineering degree.
It's one of the components, but it's not anything that we're dealing with right here. And that is operational as opposed to policy. So right here, what we're talking about is recruitment for those positions that are difficult to find. In a meeting I just had this morning, we were discussing how difficult it is.
I understand. It's just every time I ask a question, you tell me it's not relevant, but I'm telling you it is relevant because if we can hire in-house without an engineering degree, then we wouldn't have to pay $18,000 for outside. So it
We
is
have 20+ capital improvement projects ongoing. We cannot move forward without a very experienced public works director. We have to do a full recruitment. Those are multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects. And we simply cannot try and bring in someone who does not have that experience, counselor. That would be incompetence
I'm
at
not
its
saying
best.
to bring in someone who's incompetent. I'm saying that, I mean, I'm sure we have competent people in the public works department.
All right, Evan?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's also to reiterate what our city manager is saying. I'm hearing that, I mean, it's something we struggle with at the university, and we've had to use firms. Salem Health, same thing. Being in a rural community, it's harder to make sure that our reach gets out to where we need to be. And I think it's the responsible thing to do a large search, even if we end up hiring someone in-house, right? It's the rational, reasonable thing to do. So I think it's important to do it. And it is unfortunately the cost of doing business. So hopefully we find someone good with the money we're spending to do it.
Right.
Yeah. That
Public
means,
Works Director retires in June of 2026.
that makes sense to me then to make sure that we have the best, most qualified person for that job. And it'd be great if that person lives here. But yeah, that makes sense to me. It does.
Just to give a comparison, I talked to a person in charge of a nearby municipality, and they had just hired a finance director, and the finder's fee for that, which is what we're talking about here, was $10,000. And it was considered a deal.
I would just suggest a failed recruitment, it's just as costly. And I think we have too many projects, too many significant projects in this community. To one, have a failed recruitment and then have to enter the process again. And have somebody who, for better or worse, may not be quite up to those projects. We can't afford those projects not to move forward successfully. So those costs, while this is $10,000, those are multi-million dollars in costs. And so I know it's uncomfortable to say we're hiring a recruiting firm, but having been a part of failed recruitment for big opportunities, that's very costly to both the agency, the organization, and the community.
Rob, you said that you had budgeted for some overlap between you and your successor. Is that also budgeted for the public works director?
I don't know.
I don't know if Gerald did. Yes, he did, as a matter of fact. We are planning, I don't know how long, but we are planning some overlap. If you promise not to quote me, I think in the back of my head, he was saying 60-ish days, but thank you.
Good.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
Nita.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jason. I'm the IT director for the City of Independence. My budget's gonna be similar to Amanda's. There's not much change from last year. We basically cut everything that we can cut. You'll see a very, very small increase, just anticipating increases in electricity, utilities, things like that. You already keyed in on the personnel issue. Essentially, we're looking to take over IT services for Mom. They approached us and asked us to do that. So that increase in personnel would be to cover the cost of that position. Monmouth would fully pay for those. Go ahead.
Can you describe what you think that's gonna look like?
So it would be a full-time employee, high-level employee that I manage. They would report to me, but they would have an office there.
They'd be dedicated to Monmouth. So
Yeah,
it's
that
not
would
like you're
be-
gonna take time away and do stuff in Monmouth.
Correct. They would be primarily assigned there, but it would also give me a backup. If I need to take a vacation, they would also be familiar with our systems and vice versa.
You don't get vacations.
Yes. So in addition to that, that deal with Monmouth would also help us because it will cover a percentage of my salary as well, because obviously I'll be managing another employee. So we'll find out how that's gonna move forward once Monmouth has their budget committee meetings. The only other changes in my budget are just line items. You'll see on utilities telephone that changed. Previously, the phone system for the IT department was getting wrapped into the dues and memberships, which is software subscription. So I just wanted to move it into telephone because that made more sense to me. The only other increase was cyber liability insurance. There was a small increase there. Other than that, the only thing else that I wanted to highlight is that overall, all the software that I provide for the city has actually gone down by $27,000 this year.
Let's get geeky for a moment. Talk about what cybersecurity insurance does for cities.
So essentially, if the worst case scenario happens, which in my mind would be ransomware, that helps us cover all the costs of dealing with that situation, hiring attorneys, dealing with rebuilding the system, hiring forensic experts to come in and see what happened. If we need to buy anything to fix the issue to make sure it doesn't occur in the future, or if for some reason we decide to pay the ransom, that can help cover that as well.
Well, you go first, Devin.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Osprey camera.
Yes.
Question around costs associated with that. So I see that the hotel, the city, and I believe the fire district
Correct.
are co-sponsors on that. So do we get, do they just throw money into a pot and then we run it?
So
How does that?
sort of, essentially, I just developed those relationships. We had the idea of creating an Osprey camera. Looking what infrastructure was available, we saw the hotel was there. I made relationships with them, said, hey, do you mind if I use their internet? And they said, no problem, you can have it for free. So we gave them a logo for that. Pacific Power or the fire department has been sponsors. That was basically because they donated the heavy equipment to be able to get up to the nest to install the camera. And then as far as our costs, it's very minimal. We pay about $100 a year for some software to enable the live streaming to the YouTube channel.
Do you have, do you pay attention to traffic on it?
Yes, it is the #1 driver of traffic to our YouTube channel. At one point, when we first started, there was over 300 people viewing it at the same time. When we first started our YouTube channel, we had about 150 subscribers. We now have over 1,000, and that's primarily due to the Osprey.
Well, I also love the view of it, because I think it's a great way to,
Yes,
it's a great way to present the city of Independence.
yeah, you got the river in the background, the sky.
Now I'll ask my question. Does any of the event center technology come under your department?
It does not under the current agreement, so that was a one-time deal where we had set up basic AV for them, and then that's what you got.
Okay.
City Manager West said in her dream wish list at the beginning of this that we are short in the IT department and could use additional help. Why would we want to partner with Monmouth if you're already short-staffed? And does that completely pay for itself having Monmouth, and how much more work does that add to you? And how is that a benefit to people in the business?
Having that extra set of expertise at my level will be extremely beneficial to be able to work together. They'll primarily be focused on Monmouth, but they can also help out if we need to bring in extra resources.
Do you think we're gonna still have to hire someone to cover the needs of independents?
That would be ideal, yes.
Which leads us to some of the things we gave up.
Yes, so, yeah, this budget is definitely cut down to the bone. We are putting off some important maintenance things. We're taking less of a proactive role in technology and more of a reactive role. That's a decision that we've made to help the shortfall.
Got a couple questions, actually. So just so I'm understanding it correctly, I want to make sure I'm understanding. We have a full-time IT,
Yes,
okay, and Monmouth, we're going to hire somebody over there, you're going to work together. That amount is included on this budget?
yes, and there's also a part-time IT person in there.
Okay, so do we currently have a part-time IT person
Yes.
as well? Okay, so we have 1.5 staff for our city right now.
Correct.
Okay, and this new position that's listed on here, you said that was small, correct? That was, okay. That comes out to 87,000?
No, so. That for the proposed budget, it would go up to 183,000.
183,000 for,
So. My position is allocated over multiple funds because,
Okay.
you know,
okay.
I work for the
That
police
makes sense.
department, the library, things, all that. So you're not gonna see my full salary in there.
Okay.
Same thing with that.
I was a little confused on the
Yeah.
numbers there. So how much did you say you were spending for streaming software?
It's like $100 a year.
Oh, 100, okay, I thought you said 100,000.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's all, those are my questions. Like, whoa.
Martin Willis is next.
So Jason, when I hear that we're taking a reactive rather than a proactive stance
Yes.
on some maintenance things, does that in any way increase our vulnerabilities and possible necessity for that cybersecurity insurance?
So actually, it doesn't affect our ability to get the level of coverage that we do for the amount that we're paying. It's mostly internal things that are not, security related or defensive. They could be considered a security issue because obviously if something important fails and it's impacting operations. So I guess it's more of a risk management thing. But yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Example.
Oh,
I don't like the answer, but yes, you answered.
so yeah, specifically, Sean just reminded me of the thing. So it would be, for example, we have a server that we had planned to only run for 5 years before it was replaced. So now we push that off to like 8 years, for example. Now, the server's still running fine, but you know, we like to get ahead of it and make sure we replace it before it's really old.
Deferred maintenance scares me.
And
So,
Sure.
water, sewer, you know,
I keep me awake at night.
if we lost that server, Jason, what would happen?
It depends on the server, but there are impacts if you choose to continue this, which I don't think this budget is sustainable for very long. And the reason for that is if we lose an important switch or an important server, it's not just a matter of, okay, swapping a new one real quick because you've got the money. I've got to place the order, wait for it to get here, configure it, install it, all that. So that could potentially mean a week, 2, 3 of operations really grinding to a halt in the city.
and is
The
the
finance
smart
server?
equipment foreign built?
It's more than.
Sorry, is most of our equipment foreign built?
A lot of the components in there are definitely foreign. So yeah, the tariffs are definitely an issue that we've been facing. We're already seeing increases on equipment.
So we're probably gonna pay more later than we would.
I would expect that as far as how things have gone so far politically, yeah.
Thank you.
You've made purchases in the last 28 days that we've had tariffs.
Yes,
Source,
Cloud-based services.
yes,
Do we use?
we
is the
do.
City on the cloud?
Yes, we use the cloud quite a bit in various areas. We use Microsoft Office 365, so lots of SharePoint. There's a whole ton of stuff with all of our evidence.com is cloud-based, so there's a lot. We We tend to like the cloud because we are a lean IT team, you know, it's hard for me to be, for instance, a security expert 24/7 on all these separate products. When these companies have dedicated teams that are familiar and experts in those particular things, so we like that approach.
Put off system refresh 2 years ago.
Yes,
Are we still putting off that system refresh?
so we are basically forced into refreshing all the PCs, and that's primarily due to Windows 11 coming out. Well, it's already out. It's Windows 10 sunsetting in October of this year. And we will have to do that to be compliant.
Follow up on my question. So when we do cloud-based services, are we adding additional risks to cybersecurity threats? Do they come with additional coverage when we work with cloud-based services? Is it just put on our, if something happens to them and we're impacted, do we have to use our insurance, or are they covering, like, how does that work for that kind of stuff?
As
We
far
talk about evidence. And
we would go after them if there's something were to happen with their systems, because we have agreements in place that, you know, will be available this much, and here's the protections in place. We have a lot of those are called security addendums with the police department specifically.
Great, thank you.
That's it.
Great.
Very good.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
That's me.
You,
So, everybody, the economic development department, is definitely trimming down. You'll see the main changes are in personnel services. More of my time is getting allocated across, other departments, other funds. And then, really, beyond that, the only significant changes are in dues and memberships. Again, that's, a lot of the IT stuff, as well as a small amount for a data platform, that'll kind of help us better understand visitation to the community, to businesses, to parks, things like that. And you'll notice actually I also zeroed out professional services, just again, trying to kind of reduce where I can. The other thing I'll point out on training and travel, that was significantly higher than was budgeted, this current fiscal year. That is largely because of, a DC trip that the three of us took. It was funded by the Federal Department of Transportation as part of a Thriving Communities, program that we were part of. The same thing happened last year. So there's actually, revenue coming in, somewhere else in the budget. Rob could probably tell you, that will offset that amount. That's about it.
I had one question, please. Do you get speakers honoraria when you go, give presentations at places? I know you and Fred had a road show or have a road show, but like when you are a presenter for the LOC conference or something, is there some money that comes back to you?
Not usually, generally they will cover, the registration for the conference or what have you. Sometimes they'll fund the hotel room, and travel as well. A lot of times we sort of see it as kind of a mutually beneficial situation where we're able to be out there talking as essentially the experts on whatever it is that we're talking about, project Independence as a place that's doing good things and achieving good things, and that tends to come back to us in the way of new opportunities, new partnerships as the kind of agency knows folks.
But on paper, that pretty much zeros out.
On paper, it doesn't really show up. I mean, very occasionally I'll get, $100 that I'll just have them send to the city.
or we'll just go around.
You said that the three staff members who took the field trip to Washington DC, you said it was covered with a,
It was reimbursed by the Federal Department of Transportation.
does that reimbursement cover the expenses of having staff here cover your positions while you're gone?
No, it did not.
We didn't have staff cover it.
You had no.
We don't have any
interim
back.
City manager.
I
You had
didn't
no
go.
city manager for a week.
I didn't go.
Actually, it was Fred and Marshall and I.
I couldn't go. We didn't have to have backfill for Sean or Marshall or Fred for the three days. 3 days.
Yeah, I think it's 3 days.
3 days they were gone.
So, if I'm correct, the downtown manager fell into your department.
She's an EPS, but she's actually under tourism and events. So I do supervise her, but she shows up under tourism and events.
Okay, thanks.
I guess this is more of a general comment. I know we're focused with the budget on reducing, right, budget cuts, but I do think it's important to keep it. And should be to keep it relevant, and that would actually bring revenue into the city, so I guess my statement is just a concern about it is a valuable department, and I don't think we should cut it too much so that it hinders it's actually being able to. We want to attract more businesses to help grow the revenue side.
To add to what the mayor just said, I think sometimes organizations get in this deficit mindset, especially when we've had deficits where you don't think strategically. And this is a area of the budget where a little strategic investment can go a long way. So I just want to echo the mayor's thoughts about, as we are being mindful of how we spend our money, let's really lean into strategic investments to bring in businesses and widen our tax base. That can help us get out of this deficit faster. I just wanted to say I appreciate what the mayor said.
Right. So it says your salary here on line 51100. So is that 10% of your overall salary? Because I was trying to look at what it is on page 108. And so I'm trying to figure out how much, if it's 10% of your salary. What?
Okay, sorry, I didn't know if you were done.
No, I'm not.
So it's a portion of his salary, but it's also a portion of the city manager's salary, my salary. It's there on page 108. That number comes from the bottom of that column, and you can scan up to see all of the allocations that hit that department.
This is why it's not so. It's really transparent for me. How much of your time do you think that you give to economic development?
I mean, I guess it depends on how you consider it. I mean, I spent a lot of time with infrastructure, and that's, more than likely allocated towards water and sewer, but it also relates to economic development because, if we don't have the infrastructure, we can't attract the businesses. So, I mean, I don't know, yeah, it's, we kind of talked about it a while ago, which is how the allocations were created. I don't remember offhand what I've allocated at.
I don't remember either. And, but I want to say somewhere around.
But some of those economic development activities are serve the water utility, and some serve the sewer utility as well.
And
that's why we spread.
This, so we can be transparent with how much money is actually being spent to cover his position and other people's positions, instead of dividing them up into 15 different categories. It's really hard for at least me, and maybe people in the public, to be able to look at how much money is actually being spent somewhere when it's divided amongst 15 different areas.
So it's actually more transparent, Counselor, because if we just took, say, my salary and we put it in the general fund, right? We just put it in administration. I spend time across all funds, so the community wouldn't know what I do at all. Because and not to mention, with a shortfall in the general fund, we're not doing interfund loans from water, sewer, and streets, and so my time in no way is allocated for water, sewer, and streets isn't paying at all. And so this is incredibly transparent. You can see for each individual exactly what we're doing and how much time we're spending. I spend a good amount of my time because we have infrastructure projects in infrastructure. So 30% water, right? Very clear. That's 30%. 25% transportation, 25% sewer. I mean, I don't know how much more transparent we could be in what we're
I just don't
doing.
think it's transparent. I don't think it's accurate. When I asked Sean to tell me what how much time he spends in economic development, I'm not really sure.
Well, you are allowed your opinion.
And I will say that when I was sitting on the budget planning committee, they had a very detailed time card tracking that they were using to keep track of it, and every staff member is doing that when they're working on projects or writing it down. And I'm sure they have access to that, they just don't have it right now.
So memory's not perfect, but.
Where are we at? Yeah.
I just want to kind of talk back on to what both the mayors said, Councilor Ford said, I don't have a louder voice, I would do my best.
Oh, sorry.
We are at an interesting inflection point as a city. And I think kind of some of it kind of hits home with the economic development and making strategic decisions to grow and diversify our tax base. And making sure that as we think about cuts, we also have to think about how we're going to grow ourselves out of this. And so whether it is the economic development department, and I would argue that your relationships that you build is economic development. This is a relational business. It is not, it isn't just going around and talking, it is building those relationships to bring people into this community. And I would extend that comment across to our libraries and to our parks as well. This is what brings people, including businesses, into this community. And so as we think about reductions and cutting, we need to consistently be thinking about how are we building ourselves back out of this and not let a cut today be a long-term deficit for ourselves. I think economic development is just one of those key places that we need to be thoughtful about and make sure we are marketing ourselves and our industrial lands I won't use the word right, but to an appropriate company to come in and sell. Thank you.
I've worked in the public sector for over 20 years, and you call it allocations, I call it chargeback. But it's not only transparent, it's accountable. And if you're using some kind of tracking mechanism, even better. Even better, because then you get it down to the penny. And that makes a lot of sense to me. So that I think is being accountable to the taxpayer.
Yeah, I mean, I think just reiterating that. I think it is incredibly helpful that we are keeping track of time and allocating that across the departments. It's way more effective than he said, putting it in the general fund, and especially if it's already integrated into the timekeeping software, then it's really not that much more burdensome for people to be tracking on a weekly or monthly basis. So I'm in favor of it.
I just wanted to clarify too, so I'm not sure if the concern is like the amount of money that we're spending on individual employees, but those are already negotiated. You have, most of the employees have union protection anyway, so it's not even anything that could be changed, right? Like if we're allocating like, 0.1 here and 0.5 there, or we put 0.15 here and 0 here, like it doesn't actually matter when it comes down to the dollar amount, right?
Correct.
Okay.
It's just where we take the dollar from.
Okay, so if, for instance, because I think we kind of get to the crux of the question. The city engineer, and you see allotment of those are tiny little. I think it's 0.1 to parks, 0.25 to transportation, and then 3 other funds. If someone were curious enough and wanted to get down to the annual dollar amount, how would one do that with those figures?
You would request records on what the salary is, and then you would take a look at, let's say he makes $100,000, you would take those percentages.
And then be out, to see the out, but to get that total figure would be a records request.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we purposely don't present individual staff people's salaries in the
Right.
budget. We're not required to by law.
Right.
So.
No, and I know the media periodically does through the state capitol, everybody's salary gets put out there, so.
Oh, I was gonna.
Okay.
All right,
I
you both clear at the same time, so.
I
I have the
want
sunlight
to
in my eyes.
reiterate what committee member Roden was saying, because I understand what she's saying. When you look at the salary totals in each department, it becomes very confusing, just like with the IT a moment ago. It lists a certain salary amount, And I'm not saying we need to change that. I do think that this is the more transparent way of doing it. It's much more clear. It just requires more work on behalf of the people reading it. So I understand why some people in the community may look at this and go, wow, that's a lot of money. Or, you know, we only have one person in that department. We can't understand why it costs that much, but that's not actually reflective of what the salaries are for the people working in that department. And I just wanted to state that so that anybody listening is clear. If I'm understanding it right. Okay. No, that was too much.
Oh. Evan, did you have something else to say?
I think it's been reiterated.
Just also to note that on page 106, there is a compensation plan that illustrates the steps that are paid to the individual employees.
No.
So,
Yeah,
It's
all
sunshine
sunshine to me.
Boom, and there it is. No public records request required. Cool, thank you.
So you can just pick a,
That's handy, Rob. Thank you.
All right, I think we're done with that. Department. Any other further comments? Oh, sorry.
Not to belabor the point too much, but would it be possible to do, if you're looking at, you know, page 38 with the economic development on line 51100, do you add potentially a second line where you have the in-house or organic salary and then the chargeback salary? You would see the spread of.
Well, it's actually all in-house, that individual.
For the department.
Pardon?
So like, if you have the city manager contributing some time to public works, right? You could have a separate line in public works where there's a outside support salary, I guess, because I think that the confusion is that all the salary is combined together, and as opposed to like, you know, public works work in that department of public works, so you could have
So,
a separate
Can I
line.
ask a question? I guess I'm trying to understand what the committees wants.
I'm not even saying there's a one, I'm just asking if it's possible.
so
I'm not sure how I do that.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that we.
are we
could
getting to a
do it.
solution without a problem, I guess? And I always look for that because again, and you'll hear me say this for the next 5 times that we meet. I only have so many staff.
Right.
And as you start to ask us to do more and more and more and more, that staff has to take time away from the day-to-day services we're trying to provide the community for something that there's not a problem. So I try to be very, very, very cautious and not try to require my staff to provide a solution when there's not really a problem.
Are you suggesting dollar amounts versus percentages?
Yeah.
So,
But it's a random crazy idea, it's just
I mean,
something.
that might be maybe the, like, total budget committee comments, we could talk about this, we're still just talking about the economic development
Right.
fund individually. Yeah. So, are there any more comments about the actual?
I do have a question, for sure.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So I've been hearing about some legislation that's gonna make it super difficult to build big things in the Portland area. Which will push things down here, will probably make y'all really busy. So, and that's a good thing, we want y'all to be really busy. So, I guess my question is, do you feel like this department is sufficiently staffed to meet the need?
I mean,
honestly, no.
yes, I mean, you know, you do the best of what you have, right? You know, if I had another person, I could do more things, but, you know, yeah, you work with what you got. I mean, Marshall's been super helpful, taking a lot of that load of the grant side of things off of my plate, which then frees me up to have more conversations with developers and other business folks and, you know, to do some of these other things. So I think, I mean, there's always an ebb and flow there, yes, but another person I'd be able to do that much more, but I could do plenty with what I got.
And if I can follow up real quick, I think. And maybe this goes in the bucket of asking staff to do too much with the little time they have, but I'm just gonna say it, I guess I can. I think it would be helpful for me to have an understanding of lost opportunities because we can't afford staff positions in capacity. So what I mean by that is, could do this, but don't have capacity to do so. So there's a conference on economic development, but no, there's no staff capacity to go attend it because you're all busy. Lost opportunity for the city because we don't have capacity. There's things that we can measure throughout the year that next year when we come back to the budget, we have some understanding of lost capacities. I think it would be helpful for us to understand that as a committee. And if that goes into the bucket of, we don't have staff to do it, that's fair. But I would, I think that one of the things that we don't think about when we have the deficit mindset that we've talked about is the missed opportunities because we're so short-staffed. And so we can start finding ways within our work to measure that. I think
I know you already have a lot on your plate, but just to piggyback on what committee member Source said, you send council a Friday afternoon breakdown of everything that goes on with staff through the course of the week. Could you maybe identify in that email, Sean couldn't go to a conference because he was busy talking to developers? Maybe you could hit some highlights in there of things that we weren't able to do. You're covering everything that we've done, but we're not necessarily seeing what we don't do.
Well,
And I don't want to get staff in the business of tracking what you can't do necessarily when it takes time away from what you actually can do, but.
And I guess I have an example to offer, if I had another person, I don't do a lot of proactive recruitment. I don't go out and cold call and, go and knock on business people's doors saying, hey, Independence is a great place, you should come to Independence. Particularly on the industrial side, because it takes a lot of effort, a lot of time. And we've only got a few industrial sites to advertise, and so the juice for the squeeze just doesn't feel there at this point. If I had an extra person, absolutely, we'd probably spend a lot more time really doing more proactive recruitment, whereas now we're working through partners to say, hey, here's what we have available, you're the one getting inbound calls, think of us when you get something, and then I pick up the phone if I get a call. So I think that's a lot of the missed opportunity.
But you're leveraging partners to kind of.
Yeah, we're doing what we can, we're just not being as proactive as we could.
Fair.
That was his department.
Louise?
Thank you.
Jump right into it. I'm Juventino Bañuelos, chief of the police department. And you'll have to forgive me, this is my first time through. I've been told I can only use that excuse once, so. But jumping right into it, I'll tell you that the vast majority of our accounts are going to continue to be similar. And we'll highlight those that have a significant increase or decrease. Right off the top, you'll see in personnel and services that there's an increase there. The increase in the personnel budget there accounts for an increase in wages, as previously stated, benefits as well as the addition of an officer, which would be partially paid for by the grant. This would allow us to start catching up to similar size communities. And for example, as things stand today, due to vacancies, training, injury, and illness, I have 11 fully operational officers right now. So these are the types of numbers that we've been functioning with for the last handful of years, approximately 5 years, and my people are feeling the strain. So that's that part. Moving on to utilities, you'll see a significant decrease, and that's going to be primarily because of change in accounting and a direct cost allocation, is my understanding. Another huge jump there is insurance and general liability. I don't know the reason, this being my first time through, that we under budgeted that year, but the increase for this year, for this upcoming year, includes I believe an 8% estimated increase for that. In communications 911, that is our dispatch service. So we receive dispatch services from Willamette Valley Communication Center. And that was the agreed upon contract. All local agencies that receive service from them, we're paying our fair share. We have professional services there's an increase there. And we look further into that one. Sort of number one. There, because of our current staffing issues and the strain that my people are feeling, we are hoping to try to emphasize wellness, health. And a part of that is continuing down the path that we started several years ago, and trying to take care of those few that we do have. And as we catch up in staffing, we're trying to build that culture so that we don't find ourselves in the same situation 5 years from now. And dues and memberships, I believe Mr. Mooney addressed that earlier on. And there is, because of those accounting changes and the direct cost allocation, there's kind of a flip-flop. So you'll see software subscriptions went down significantly, but some of those costs were reallocated to different accounts. That's what I have.
Nicely done, Tina, thank you.
Chief, you mentioned, and I'm sorry if I misheard you, but you mentioned that the budget was under budgeted 1 year. What year was that?
That was for insurance.
For insurance, okay, I didn't hear that part.
I'm sorry. That was for general liability insurance.
Okay, thanks.
That was this last fiscal year.
Chair, Chief, I'm really interested to know, how do we body cams and storage, video storage? I know when I got my tour of the building by Jason, we talked a little bit about the challenge of storing all the video that you all have to store, collect, store, and keep. How do we pay for all of, is that just additional server costs? Do you get support from the state for paying for that? How does that all work?
I don't believe we receive any support from the state for that. So we have contracts with Axon, evidence.com that provides actually many of our services to include that. Okay, our tasers, body cameras, the storage of digital evidence through the same company currently.
And do we have an on-staff person who reviews? If someone requests, is that just a public records request, someone requests body camera? Do we have a specialized person who has to review that stuff? How does that?
That would go through our records staff, like in
Okay.
many other records requests, through paper documents, but recordings would go through it as well.
Thank you.
I've got two questions.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Dr. Mooney did mention about the dues and memberships, but this is a pretty significant increase, so is there an explanation for that?
There's actually a secondary piece to that with the police department in that, and Jason can correct me if I misspeak here, but there's some things that we have that are like 3-year terms. And we're like in the 3rd year of that, so there's a renewal piece that kicks in. And I'm not articulating it very well, Jason, help me out.
Essentially, it's a licensing cost. So say you have a piece of software, you buy the license for 3 years, you pay that 3 years up front, and then the following 2, you don't pay anything. So then when the renewal comes up, you pay that big chunk again. So we've moved away from that to go to annual licensing. So then you should start to see the cost be consistent year to year.
Thank you.
And,
Yeah, what he said.
and then the second question, are we not doing a vehicle replacement this year? I didn't
That
see
would
that.
not be in the police department budget. That's in that facilities vehicle replacement reserve that Gerald spoke of last week.
That's
And,
good.
and I believe there is a car in there, it's for 2526.
I believe that there is, yes.
Yes. there.
So we plan on hiring 1 additional officer this year. Is that correct? And that's at a total cost of $480,000.
So that's includes the increase in wages and benefits for the existing officers.
Okay.
And then one addition. Yeah, I know, I was.
Seems significant. But that's all negotiated through unions, right? It's contracted, it's required. Okay. Thank you.
Just so clarifying on the dues and memberships, and then for this department, we also have a software subscriptions.
So that's, the police department has a secondary line for things that are not allocated. Those are things that are very specific to the police department.
Gotcha. I just want to say I appreciate the work that the police department do. I find it very concerning that the police is strained. I think that's something we should really focus on when we look at this budget on how to relieve that stress on our police department, how to get you more support. Every week, City Manager West sends out a report on what you guys do, and it's amazing, and I appreciate you keeping the community safe. And I fear that, we may not be as safe in the future if we do not look at this and cover this and make sure your officer will be control here.
I guess I do have one kind of random personal question. There, the other night, there were, I believe, 6 officers that made a stop in front of my house. That seems like a significant number of officers on at one point in time. How are we able to do that if we have such short staffing?
Yeah, well, I don't know the details of that particular incident, I don't know where you live or where that would.
I understand.
I can assure you that, well, was it, did I hear you say it was a night?
Yes,
Yeah,
I think it was Friday night.
as of late, without going into operational details, I'll tell you that if you saw black SUVs, could have been a mixture of independents and law officers.
That was,
Which is often the case, right? So we assist each other often, and for independents to have 6 patrol officers on at any given time, that's.
yeah, that's even out of line with what we've been discussing, so, okay, thank you.
Were you patrolling today, chief?
I was today, yes.
So our chief was on patrol today.
I'll be in uniform more often, for a little while.
Which is not something we should be having our chief do.
I'm not that old.
I have a question about recruitment. The recruitment runs separate from HR presumably, is that the same? You told me.
Yeah, so portions of our recruitment budget also go to things like medical assessments, psychological assessments.
Right, all the, right, okay,
And those costs are going up.
right, okay.
Now, that's also, that's not only for our own paid staff, but when we rebuild our volunteer corps, that'll be for that as well.
Okay.
So to have a reserve police officer, for example, they have to go through the same process.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So municipal court, I'll take, so again, not a lot different here, year over year. You'll see the personnel services went up a bit, and that's because this is an allocation of the city recorder's time. And when the city recorder was the payroll person in finance, she was less expensive. And so the allocation to municipal court was less. But because Myra is our municipal court clerk, just the base for that allocation went up. So that accounts for that difference. Everything else in here is pretty much same as last year. Yes.
I'm I'm quite ignorant of the whole municipal court thing. Why do we have a municipal court and Monmouth has a municipal court? Is there any possibility of combining those two? Are we required to have a municipal court?
We're not statutorily required to have a municipal court as a city.
So why do we have?
But I don't know how to answer that. That's
You
a
know, do you have thoughts?
policy decision.
I can motion, municipal courts, at least at the lower level, tended to receive violations, claims, for the most part, they're just serving limited ballots. Now, for a very long time, I don't know the status today, but for a very long time, Ron also chose to see claims in their court as well. You know, that's
It's kind of a division of labor kind of thing.
that we enforce different ordinances, they're not the city exact ordinances.
Would there be any benefit to combining Monmouth and Independence Municipal Court?
We could look at it, but at first blush, I'm thinking probably not. Other cities, they do send it through the county. The problem is there's significant delays, right? And as Tina said, it's very different ordinances, or what you said, very different ordinances, et cetera.
Would the only savings be the allocation from the city of Porter?
We would still have to pay our portion of the judge and our portion of the attorney, all the other expenses like the insurance and the liability, all that would just flow into a different department within the funds, right? So
So, and I know that the purpose of the municipal court is not to make money. But we do actually have our revenues in this department are higher than what our expenses are for what that's worth.
It seems to me there's a bit of a
20,000.
convenience for folks to have a court here rather than have to go elsewhere.
There is some, yeah. Can't think of the word, it's
Yeah.
easier for ours,
accessible.
accessible.
Is our municipal courts used consistently?
Yes, it's very busy.
It's very busy. Okay. And it does not serve any of the criminal aspects of sort of.
That's correct.
And our city reporter on page 108, it says that the court fees for the city reporter are 0.25. Is that
25%.
so? 25% of the city reporter's
Time spent
Time
supporting
spent
the
support.
municipal court.
I mean, that's a lot of time.
Mhm.
You're really busy in other things.
That's what we've been saying.
Wait till next week. I have court the hour before we have budget next week. I'm doing 2 in a row.
Yeah. All of my staff are like that. All of my staff are doing the job of 2 to 3 times.
Well, this may be an area we have to try back.
It's an area that brings in money.
It just takes money.
Yeah, it does. I mean, if we can, if you all can find us more money, I will hire more staff. 100%, man. We've been reducing staff for 2 or 3 fiscal years, and if you can find more, we've given you a list of all the staff we need.
That's it for municipal court.
There, everybody, have to bear with me, this is only my second time doing it.
You only get to say that.
I can only say that once. So yeah, basically it looks very similar to last year. What you will note is there's increase in salary and benefits and taxes, and I asked Rob what that was about just a second ago. And part of that is related to page 108, the redistribution across the general fund. As you'll note on 108, we're reflecting the city recorder's time and her support to the planning department in a way that we haven't done before, and so that accounts for that increase there. Basically, everything else is the same. One thing I'll call out is you'll note that we have contract services at the bottom for 25,000, and we didn't really spend any of that. Well, we spent some of that this year. We used it on an intern. Previously, our goal with that funding was to have sort of support planning staff available, where if I got swamped, I could reach out to Mid-Willamette Valley COG and they could help us write a staff report or whatever. We have used them for that in the past. One thing that I would like to say, just in terms of how we try and be efficient, one thing we realized is doing that is very expensive. And so what we have done in-house is sort of like tried to streamline how we do staff reports, so we can sort of crank them out in a more efficient manner. So we weren't having to actually tap that fund. Now, we're keeping it in there because we think potentially if things really pick up, we're gonna need that support. But I just wanted to call that out, why that didn't get spent at all this last year. Otherwise, basically, everything's the same. Are there any questions for me?
Is that just a rollover then? Is it rolling over?
I don't know.
We don't really do it that way, but yeah, it was in there last year. We left it in there this year as placeholder in thoughts that we made it.
Does the trolley fall under community development?
I definitely spend some of my time on the trolley. There is no money though that comes direct, there is no money that comes from the general fund for the trolley. We did get a originals grant to run a pilot, or no, excuse me, a feasibility study. That is, those grant funds are still, a portion of those grant funds are still in a grant fund somewhere in the budget.
And then we get administrative funding from the grant for Fred's time that is, we just billed one for the fiscal agent. And so we do get reimbursed for Fred's time.
Two more questions, and I know I will be attacked for the second one, but this is just a question. How much time do you spend on the trolley, percentage wise, and what would happen to our community if we eliminated your position for years?
So the first one was
How much time on the trolley?
how much time on the trolley. It's actually, it varies quite a bit. I would say normally it's very low, like this week, I would say it's less than 2 hours.
A couple of months ago in council meeting, you said you're spending an exorbitant amount of time.
I didn't say an exorbitant. I tend to say a lot about a lot of stuff, but if you
Yes, you do, Fred. Yes, you do.
If you watched what I do on if you had a camera at my desk and you watched what I did, you would note that there's a lot of staff reports. Working to bring an ordinance to a first or a second reading at a council meeting takes a lot of time. There's a lot of effort that goes into it. Also, we do historic preservation, which we do all the prep for those meetings, and the planning commission, which we do all the prep for those meetings as well. So, we get phone calls from people trying to do everything, all sorts of stuff on their property.
From fences.
From fences to subdivisions to annexation to all of this stuff. So,
If we didn't have Fred, we would grind to a halt.
And then get the contract, I mean, you'd have to contract.
if you didn't have, so the calculation that went into my position when we went away from, we were contracting, and when Tom was here, city manager Pessimir was here, they weighed the cost and benefit versus the contract service that they were getting through AKS at the time versus bringing it in-house, and they thought it was a far better value to have somebody in-house at the time.
Fred steps.
Well, Fred, I do appreciate that you said that, compared to contract services to what we get for you, we get a lot more with you being in-house than we would find contract service. And it's the thing to keep in mind.
One quick add on to that, and I think it's not just for this department, but other departments. People's time fluctuates from week to week, so Fred may spend 1 to 2 hours on the trolley this week. And then during some other event or preparation of maybe a grant fund, it could be 12 hours that week. And
I think that's true of any staff member across the board, so there is no sort of one size. That person does this weekly. The same way every week. And I think even like with Myra's time, it's, you know, this week is gonna be busier, the next week's gonna be exorbitantly busy, but. I think we just have to accept that that's gonna fluctuate. From week to week. And those are hard questions to answer.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question on one of the lines. I see a fluctuation. I wonder if you could explain it. On 63140, the contract services. It looks like for the last couple of years, we budgeted a substantial amount, and then it turns out to be almost next to nothing. And I was wondering what that jumping back and forth is reflected, though, where.
Yeah, that's what that's what he was talking about, that $25,000 for development services.
Yeah, got it.
He's worked hard to not spend that money, but we've left it in there in case we.
So I try to stay out of housing in the legislature, but, have you been following some of the legislation moving through that's gonna change some of the timelines for housing development committee?
Yes.
And what would that mean for you in terms of your capacity to respond to efforts to prevent the increased housing that's being built, not just here, but around the state? And for code adjustments, or building permitting, I mean, just if you have a minute to talk kind of about what this means for your workload.
So those are design standards and the shot clocks, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not familiar with the shot clock,
Okay.
so.
I can talk to that.
So, I mean, a lot of what, so some of the things that happened at the last legislative session have brought more, planning decisions internal. So, that means that a planner is gonna be making the decision much more than a planning commission. So I would argue that's one reason why you want to have somebody who knows what they're doing and making the decisions. And who cares about the community.
And that wasn't a question, who cares about a community, that was a statement.
One
That
person
cares about
cares.
a community.
Right, exactly.
That's my point, is that
Yeah,
we have really put a lot of those decisions in your hands now in an effort to expand our housing stock around the state. And so having somebody who understands our community, who lives in our community, who interacts with individuals in our community on a daily basis versus a contract service, and outsourcing is always more expensive. And so just again, really appreciate the decision to bring that in, especially as kind of these other issues are coming to bear at this time, so.
yeah, and it will become harder and harder as those, if that legislation goes through with the shot clocks. And we, at my level, we've been monitoring it and talking to our legislators, because when you have one planner who's handling HPC planning, city council, talking to the developers, you know, all the things Fred does, and you add in a shortened timeline.
You know,
I'm just gonna, that 25,000, we may really need it.
I'll also just comment that at the planning commission level, we've spent the last year sort of doing a lot of meetings of revising code to, because of state legislation that's passed that we have to incorporate. So I know that's taken quite a bit of the planning commission's time. I can think of at least 2 or 3 meetings where we go through that stuff. And plus you have to prep it, and then you have to do the notice and the hearing. I mean, it's sort of, there's a lot of effort going into it. Just for color comment.
And Fred doesn't have really staff, he has an intern that helps, but he has to do all of everything.
And Dr. West, how do you account for staff time when they cover a committee or commission or board meeting? How does that get charged back, or is that just part of their regular duties?
It's usually considered part of their regular duties, so for Fred, it's just planning, and I'm at city council, it's just another hour in my day.
I'm curious, and this is probably none of my business, but if Fred covers HPC and planning commission, does he get to flex time that time? Does he get to bank some flex time, or is there some flexibility around his hours during the course of that day?
So we're at the department head level, we're all salaried, and the more we work, the less we make.
Gotcha.
Sure. So I've had the pleasure, until recently to sit on the planning commission with. A couple folks in this room and supported by Fred. And I feel like I've already seen the sitcom Day in the Life of Fred. And that's because our planner is probably one of the busiest human beings. And not to diminish anyone else, all the city staff is busy, but the work I see firsthand that Fred does is not only A class, but it's very detail oriented and it's really easy to read and understand really complicated issues. And I think he is a gem for our city. And I think we need to lean into more friends, not less friends. One of the things I've heard from constituents is this, I wouldn't say delay, but when you only have one planner, things take a little longer than people probably want them to take. And that could impact business in our community. And there's another lost opportunity when we only have one planner who has to do dot the i's and cross the t's on everything, right? And so, again, one of these things for us to think about as a community is what kind of community we want to live in. What kind of opportunities are missed when we have this deficit mindset, and what are strategic ways that we can invest in our community. And I think planning is one of those places like economic development where we're gonna, whether we want to or not, we're gonna have to lean in because the state's forcing us to. So we should think about that strategically and figure out ways to support the city staff to do it the right way, because it's gonna be done to us anyway. Thank you.
Fred. Can we take a short break? Oh, you, Fred. Short break? Yeah.
Sure.
5 minutes?
So I've got building department and this is another one of those you're starting to hear this a lot. It's basically the same as last year. We budgeted for the revenue side, the permit revenues, total sources, based on a conversation with our building official, at the staff level and including Chair Garrison and me, Member Boisvert, talk about what he expects in terms of permits to be issued, development that's coming. We believe these numbers to be our best guess. I wouldn't say they're overly conservative, but I wouldn't say they're overly optimistic either. And so then just to kind of scroll down through the rest of it, the expenses are very, very consistent with the prior year. There's nothing new or nothing surprising in there. So I would take questions.
Is e-permitting saving any staff costs?
If it is, I'm not aware of it right now.
So e-permitting is a challenge, shall we say?
I hear about it frequently.
Yes.
It's been a real challenge for me trying to, and now that Nikki's gone, I've picked up that for the finance department. And it's a challenging thing just to keep track of the transactional stuff. It does not integrate with our financial system, so everything's done manually.
Yeah, but it was required by the state, and so we were mandated to do something. We couldn't afford our own system, so we had to use the state system, and it is less than intuitive. Fortunately,
Really tactful.
So you're using a system that's supposed to streamline the process, but because it doesn't tie into your financial system, you're having to do something manually that you would.
I think it probably is easier for outside folks
for developers, right?
for developers and,
Right.
and for customers, which
But
is,
you
we're
pick
in the
up-
customer service business, right?
Pick up a role that you didn't have previously, though.
That's
Right.
correct.
And we have the part-time person working in IT. The other part she does is building permits, and that is basically, she's doing all that work.
I really appreciate her help these days.
Two questions for you, not talking about big dollar amounts, but I'm just curious. So the insurance, property, general liability and auto, it was. For what it was budgeted last year, it was, all of those numbers are lower than the estimated year end, but now they're increasing significantly for the proposed 25 budget. So I'm talking about 68 or 61,810 through 61,830. So all of those numbers went down for the estimated year end, but then they're going up significantly for the 25-26 budget.
And I think that reflects, so again, these are done on an allocation based on a number of bases that I don't have in front of me. But I believe we factored in the rate increases that we expect. But in terms of the specifics of those three line items, can't really tell you why they went up or down like that.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm happy to look into it because it's odd.
Would that be the same reason that Chief alluded to, that they had essentially budgeted high, but it came in low?
Eventually, yeah.
And then I think what we may be seeing this year as kind of a correction there to what the actual current market rate.
And I'm gonna be completely honest with you here, because the numbers were small, I probably didn't spend as much time on that as I did in other areas.
My second question, what's with the $3,000 bank fees for this year, this fiscal year?
Can you tell me?
Oh, sorry, 63,240.
63,240. So because more people are paying for their permits with credit cards, we allocate those merchant fees directly to the department.
Is that not going to be done again?
Yeah, that probably should have been there.
Okay.
Can we,
Yeah, can we put that on the customer then? No,
No, not legally.
We tend to try to do things.
Governments have a different set of rules than private businesses in terms of passing on those fees.
That was my.
That was your question?
Because if I go to a store and buy something and I use a credit card, they apply 3% fee to whatever.
Right,
Yeah,
So.
Yeah, we'd love to be able to do that.
that'd be nice. Can't do it.
Okay, awesome. Oh.
sorry, real quick. The proposed sources, at the top there, the jump from last year's year end to this year's projections all across the board seem to be like we're taking in a lot more fees. Is there a common reason for that or
And I may have to look to Fred or Sean, but I think there's a subdivision that people are looking at to come online.
There are
That's
multiple, there are
me guessing.
multiple projects.
I'm the
And
finance guy.
Yeah. there are multiple projects that should be coming online this year.
So that's a good faith projection.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
good faith projection.
Yes.
So just to make sure that's all stated clearly, it is costing more staff time to do this now that you are having to manually transfer the information from the automated system to our own system. And it's also costing more money to use the state system and you're required to.
I can't say that it costs more money to use the state system. I don't know.
Except for staff costs.
Staff costs, I would say yes.
Yes.
Even if
Now,
it's 20
I-
minutes, it's more.
Yeah, I wasn't here before we went to this system.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure how that was handled.
Okay,
But I know that I write a dozen journal entries every month just to get the information from the Acela permit system into our general ledger.
I see. Okay, thank you.
What would, just ballpark what our own system would cost? Or,
Um,
sorry, ballpark what our own system would cost for that incrementing piece, or what's the,
We put in a system when I was at Wilsonville, but that was 20 some long years ago, and it was a couple of $100,000 at that point.
Yeah, and again, I'm gonna pull this from my memory, so it's not quotable. I wanna say 35,000 is what we were thinking it was gonna cost.
Sorry, going back to the bank fees and how there's not, a number for this proposed budget. So those are fees that are going to be used for all of these huge numbers that are coming in as sources. So we should be expecting that number to be much more than $3,000. Will there be an amendment then?
If y'all want to propose an amendment, I'd be happy to do that, yes. You
Yeah.
can, absolutely.
Or I guess one quick clarification.
Or we could bring that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, they could be doing bank transfers also. Like if you've got a developer that's paying a large fee, they're probably aren't.
No, a lot of them are coming in on credit card. Oh, yeah, people want the miles.
Can the city restrict credit card usage? Because if the city's gonna end up eating those fees,
Well,
and if a lot of that
you know,
income.
there's a dance there because if we don't accept credit cards, then sometimes we end up with bad checks. Or we end up with cash flow issues. So, yeah, it's a fee, but it's probably in our best interest to get the money.
That makes sense. In that case, I think it does make sense to at least have a number in place there and plan for having some large fee there.
So we can add, we've got another amendment to deal with, we can add it to that if you'd like. So let me just add that right in here. Who's next?
And Victoria.
It's not me, so I'll write this up while you do that.
So in one of my other hats, I also oversee the janitorial department. And as you can tell, it's really not gone up much. We budgeted 21,000 last year and we only spent about 16. So we're actually down from last year's budget. Overall, the costs are gonna be for your supplies and that kind of thing. We have seen a decrease once we centralized all of our supplies. And we've got a great staff, so that's all I got. Questions?
All right, thank you.
Nice to know.
That should be easy.
That's not me.
Yeah. Oh, Sean. You can be Sean as a fast.
Now, one.
Yeah.
So we have community service department.
No, it stayed down.
We have a community service department, which used to be the library and museum separate, now they are one.
And absolutely nothing about our ones.
That's why it's all zeros.
As opposed to everyone else, you notice there's lots of changes. But just to run you through the big ones. It's a night, and I can't remember who said it, we're not, oh, it was Jason, we're not cutting to the bone, we've hit bone. We're proposing a museum without a building and a library without a collection. We made these combinations for the survival of both departments enrolled into one, I think is the safe way to put it right that way. So flipping back and forth between the two pages for the library specifically, you'll see we have no AV budget, no book budget, no ebooks, no programs. We're gonna rely on our friends of the Library Foundation. No, Foundation's different. Friends of the Library Group to help provide funding for those options. Similarly, Amy,
Yeah, I can throw in.
Sure.
We had a full-time director and a 30-hour week curator. And we have since lost our director. So, and we right now have a part-time intern, but she's not written into this plan. So we will have one employee. And most of the building lines that you see for the museum, which would be repairs, utilities, operations, supplies, even supplies, a lot of those lines were cut down to nearly nothing, just reflecting a small amount of time that we'll spend in the building. And then Patrick and I sat together and went through all of the details of supplies and services where we could just combine us together.
So one thing that we did, and I'll ask Mr. Moody, Rob, the city manager West, to correct me if I'm wrong. You'll notice that the line under the community services department, I think it's 63,190. That jumped up from last year to this year. What that reflects is, I'm assuming realtor costs and moving once the museum's closed. So that's why those costs aren't on this year's current budget, because we aren't doing that this year. But we'll be,
That's correct.
yeah, cool. Our notes lined up then.
And if you're curious about what does it look like in our building, I'm happy to let you know that our society is going to help fund our currently paid intern so that she can stay on to work on collections. And I'm going to be working on exhibit pop-ups throughout the community, including the Civic Center, the library, the hotel, and businesses downtown. And I'm going to be creating a partnership with the schools because our field trips, our collection will be in storage, so that's a very different experience. So, and we will be creating like a trunk, essentially, where we go to the schools instead of they come to us. And I've been working with the teacher at IES already on structuring that program, so I'm blessed.
Questions?
Yeah, questions.
Is that a potential source of income? I know before when we was the museum having the physical location, and this came up in last year's budget meeting as well. Because the school field trips were coming in and they weren't being charged, and that was part of our discussion. But if you are going out and providing a service, especially if you're going to be going outside of the immediate school district, is that a potential source of income?
I did not have any interest to go outside of our school district with this specific plan because I did take the results of the levy very seriously. And my point of view is that if the community is funding the museum, then it is our community that I should be supporting. So it would be our schools that is it. Thank you.
Amy, where will the collection be physically located and where will you work out of?
So I will be working out of the library, and the collection will be on the third floor here in the Civic Center.
Do you see any issues with, I know part of the plan is to cover staffing for the library part-time. little tiny bit of time. Do you think you can run the museum per se from the library, or do you need dedicated space to do that, maybe in this building?
I think that I will need some space here in the building, especially if our interim Delaney will be spending time in collections. It would be great to have a desk set up for her and I to split some time there. But I actually do value the fact that I'll be in the library working and collaborating with other staff and being able to invite events, programming, community students into the library with the museum being there.
I just don't being in the library, how easy it is to get sucked into library stuff.
Actually, we've talked about that a lot, and we want to make sure we're really specific about the fact that he's not gaining a library employee. If I was working here, we would let go of someone. And so I'm still gonna be working on. And we are a museum temporarily without a location, and that's another big important part of what we want to be spending time on, is working towards that eventual goal of a location.
Is the entire collection already in the database before it goes into storage, or are you still gonna be working on cataloging?
That's a big part of the reason why we brought on Delana this year, is she has been working nonstop on making sure that the entire collection is in our database, so that we're going in very organized and that it can be accessible. So she's also a big photographer. We've been increasing that part of it as well, so that we can create online exhibits. And an important thing in a museum world is accessibility, and a collection and storage is not accessible, so we want to be able to share it digitally.
And if you ever reconstitute the museum, it's organized.
Two things. First of all, in this year's, of course, there's nothing in this year's budget, but in last year's budget, I don't see any entry for payment of the debt on the building, the mortgage on the building. And also, I don't see anything in the new budget for the sale of the museum building.
So first, the debt on the museum building, because it's a general fund expense, is in the non-departmental section for the general fund that I'll get to when we finish here. And we did not budget for the sale of the museum pending input and direction from this group and from the council.
Okay, so if I'm looking at last year's budget compared to this year's community services budget, and counting salaries and now everything except for mortgage payment, I'm seeing a downward amount of $77,600, which I presume is in anticipated number of employees.
It's actually a reduction. Some of it is reduction in materials and services. There was no reduction in staff reflected in this budget.
As of
Is that
what
right?
staff is today.
Or museum.
Yeah.
There was.
Combined there was, yeah.
And that was offset a little bit, Counselor, because there are expenses to closing down the museum, or budget committee member, because there are expenses to closing down the museum, and so the savings is not going to be as high this year as it will be, say, next year.
Okay, so then if and when the building is sold, that would have actually the positive effect on next year's budget.
In several areas, because it could affect, one, our janitorial budget, it could affect our facilities, repairs and maintenance budget, it could affect something else too, utilities,
Debt
sorry,
service,
it's getting
okay.
late.
Utilities, debt service.
Yeah.
And other things.
I have had extensive discussions with people about the next phase in accommodating both the library and the museum in one building, and that would include potentially expanding the building, which was the original intent with the library anyway. But the big plus on this is we could do something like that predominantly with other people's money, not ours, and not end up with a debt.
I like no debt.
Councilor Rhodes. Just with what City Manager Porter said, I like your idea I wish we would have, last year when we tried to bring other things to the table, but some of us felt like we weren't heard last year to try to save the museum because we saw where this was going. I like the idea. I don't think the community, when they spoke to not fund the levy, was so upset with you staying focused in just our community. I think everybody would be head over heels excited if you could get an exhibit together, tour it for a month, earn money off of it regardless of where it goes. And it might be more beneficial to your time to be able to do that and reach a whole bunch of schools and try to make some money for it. I think the community would like to see the museum, like what I said last year, begin to start to pay for itself. And so I think that's something that, not that I'm speaking for you, but I thought it was a great idea to try to look at those services and even broaden it out. I'm not sure that diluting the library and the museum are the best solutions to this. So this is something City Manager West.
Sorry.
This isn't a clear cut deal for combining these two. We are still discussing this in this budget.
If we packaged it this way as staff's best proposal to try and bring to you a budget that's balanced. You're correct, it's all on the table in terms of this committee. If the committee directed us to split them back into individual departments, we would do that.
And it was based on direction from the council. So this did not come from the staff level, this was direction from the council.
It's super hard for me personally, just to say this, to give up our museum and library. I think they're amazing assets to our community and I appreciate everything both the library and the museum give to us. And I know you guys hate it when I say that, but I wish we could go back in time and not have occurred so much that. I think we could have had a very nice museum in the location we have. If we would have done the upgrades that required $40,000 instead of.
Well, I was just telling Sean, I wish I had a time machine. So I'm with you.
Well, if you guys would listen to me more, it would be all.
I was gonna ask about, because knowing what, I'm assuming the school district budget is also not particularly rosy right now, but just so that idea, what's the likelihood of being able to take a shop and exhibit around and have somebody pay for it? Because I did that down, I'm just curious, and like what kind of revenue that would bring in.
From my experience working in the museum and
Yeah.
museum world, I'm not gonna say that it would make absolutely zero. It would be close to that.
Okay.
I don't think it would be a solution that solves problems. However, it's not something that I would not do or would be unwilling to do. I actually like the idea a lot because one thing that I think is a more valuable thing to spend time on is grant writing. And so I just started doing it. I've already started. I'm working on my third grant. We're trying to get those rolling out. And if I could get one that would enable me to be reimbursed for some of my time to develop an exhibit like that, and then we could try to make money on it, I would be all for it.
Yeah, the question wasn't pointed as if it's not gonna work and don't bother, I'm just, from your professional experience on, in museum world, what's.
Something like that might help us bring in $2,000 a year.
So, but what you just said though, is you're now focusing your time more on writing grants.
Well, actually, Marshall already does the grant writing, but he and I both research and I'm taking information to him.
Do you feel that the city has done a good job in looking for grants for the museum in the past, or is it something you're just starting to look at? That's my question.
Actually, in my time with the museum, I've now worked under 3 directors. They've all applied for grants. There's varying levels of success because a lot of people are applying for those grants, but this year, during this fiscal year, some of my time was reimbursed by 2 different grants.
Someone who's spent a lot of time working with Director Christensen and her team of volunteers. I think it's important to note that a lot of the grants for museums are for building and not for services and staff time. So that's been the challenge with the Museum Society. We've actually ad nauseam been looking for grants. it's been quite frustrating trying to figure out ways to figure that out, but I think it's important for us to think about, education is not about making. Education is about ensuring a society understands where they came from and learn from our history, so we don't repeat our history, and celebrate certain parts of the history as well. And so I think it's really, I understand we have to do this, and it's really sad, but I hope we remember when we come back to, there'll be a day where we have the opportunity to bring this back. And I want us to really put a marker down around museums and libraries don't pay for themselves. It's not about balancing the budget on library fees or charging people for access to museums. These are things that provide an inherent good for society. And it's on city governments and people to figure out ways to fund them because we value these things as a society. And so we need to be really mindful of how we frame certain services in our community, because trolleys and libraries and museums don't make money. They help people and they educate people and they serve a community purpose and a public good. And so we shouldn't be expecting them to make money. We should be figuring out ways to supplement from other things that actually make sense to. So, thank you.
So this is a big one for me. I really would like to save the museum and preserve the library hours. In looking at this, I'm not convinced that we are going to save as much money as we think, given the fact that we are still going to employ a library person, or sorry, a museum person. A lot of the costs associated with this come down to building costs, which don't go away if the library is closed an extra day. The city has done a lot to cut expenses over the last couple of years. And there's just no money right now. So what I would like to propose is that we move, or I would like to make a motion that we request the city finance director to look into the precise cost it would cost to keep the museum and preserve that extra day at the library, the total dollar figure for that.
So that was a motion.
That was a motion, yes.
So just, can I just make sure I
This is just
understand?
for information on it?
Yes.
Can I just make sure I understand?
Sure.
So you're looking for a cost analysis of operating the museum in its current place, current operation, so status quo.
If we leave it status quo, what is the difference in cost between what we're projected here at 600 and some odd thousand versus that?
Would that be similar to what was said last?
I was gonna say, can we just look like,
We could, yes, but I just want to make sure we have the correct numbers because costs do change, so.
Okay, and what was the second part again? Sorry.
No, keep the extra day.
Yeah,
The extra day
the
at
extra
the
day of the
library.
library.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
Give a second.
If that's a request for information, it doesn't need to be a motion, does it?
Yeah, we agree.
Yeah, because we agreed it had to be a majority request.
I'll second.
And-
Okay. Second.
So
Discussion.
I'd just be curious on, just like looking at last year's budget as like a pretty close approximation and maybe add 5 or 10%.
I did some rough numbers. I mean, we're looking at probably $200,000 roughly. But I would like a precise number, of course, because I'm not the finance guy. But given that amount and given the fact that the public safety fee will be reduced this year, there is the possibility of handing this off to council and try to come up with those funds, which would be a minimal amount. So I think that there's an opportunity here, and I would feel remiss if I didn't pursue it.
Are you talking about fees? I'm sorry. Are you talking about? Because are you?
That is one.
Carlos next.
When we had the funding open house, you both had numbers associated with your functions. Are those separate and distinct entity functions, or was that related to the community services combination thing?
At the time, those were separate.
That was what it would cost you separately to do what you need to do.
Yes.
Okay, so we already have those numbers from the open house. So is there still a need to do an analysis or just give us those numbers?
Well, we run those numbers, but I think, how did you understand it? Because I want to make sure I'm not understanding it differently. What do you understand he's asking for?
That we would figure out what, if we had presented a separate budget for the museum, status quo, what that would look like
Okay,
versus what? I guess,
This combined.
you'd almost have to do the library also, and then compare that to the combined. And then,
That's what he's saying.
yeah,
Yeah, he's asking basically for a proposed, what would it look like if we just updated last year's numbers for this year?
but
right?
not asking to figure out where to get the money for that.
That is, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's-
Okay.
That's what it is.
Okay.
And it's my next week conversation.
yes, they have those numbers, I hope you still have those numbers, cause I didn't have those numbers, they have those numbers, right?
Should be.
And I'm sure
Not-
you do, cause
It
I
is
know.
on my computer in the library, but I don't have it here.
Fair enough.
Also presented in the planning session.
So
Yeah.
that was when we sat and went
Yeah,
through,
so
and
those
this
numbers
is what
we
I
have.
need, this is what I need, yeah.
Got it.
Whatever you estimated, you were not sure, but that doesn't include our building.
Yeah. Are you pointing to me?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
So
Just a couple of things, and I think,
Are we discussing?
we're still,
We're still in discussion.
Okay,
oh, okay. Well,
It's on
then this
discussion.
would add to the discussion on that, which is if you're talking about charging a fee for getting into the museum. Based on how many people we have visiting, which includes school groups and everything else, if we charged a $5 a head fee, that would be $75,000 over the last year. However, school groups would not be coming if they had to pay a fee. Right, Laura?
I forgot already half the things that I wanted to say.
I'm so.
But I think that it's important to know too, how much are you anticipating the sale of the building? Because it's not just how much more extra do we need to have the extra, the two departments.
Yes.
can I just roll it back, cause I wanna make sure that we're still on discussion for this particular
This
motion to
request.
bring
But I
information
think,
back.
but I think in asking for that request, like, it doesn't really fully capture the implications, right? Because if we're keeping both buildings, that means that we're not selling a building, which
That's
means that
correct.
we're not putting that money in the general fund, which means we're gonna lower our contingency. So it's not just about looking at just those two funds.
Right.
There's a whole ripple effect that happens.
Yeah, there's,
And that's why I'm requesting it.
yeah, there is other things, thank you, thanks for clarifying,
Tyler,
sorry.
I guess in the context.
oh, wait, are you done with this?
I have a bunch of other questions, but not for this discussion.
Okay.
And so, keep going on with what, committee member Ford was saying, it's not just about looking at these two budgets, we have balanced this budget and assuming some savings. And so, if the numbers are easily accessible, and there's not a lot of work to be done to find them, I may support the motion, but to what end? Like, is this gonna accompany, where are we gonna get the fees, where are we gonna get the fund? And is there gonna be a proposal to do that? And so it's fine to have the information, but unless it can come up with also, how are we going to fund it? We try to levy. And fees don't cover it. Schools aren't gonna come, if they have to pay, their budgets are dramatically being reduced. So again, if this is a series of just pulling data and bring it forward, fine. But there's a lot of work and there's no plan to accompany the loss. I'm not gonna support that.
Council Quebec?
I think what I had to say is pretty much what she said, I'm not sure, but what I was, the way I look at it is, we're asking the staff to go back and do further research, but really what the staff should be doing is giving us a proposal where the budget is balanced. So are we asking them to do this work without doing that extra step of where else is that gonna come from? I don't know, but that.
Well, Dana said
we
we
know,
have the
we know
council
from
to
last
figure
year that
that.
the budget was. You know,
I'm not crazy about that.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I'm not particularly. I see where he's coming from, not to speak for you, but I see the passion for saving the library and museum, and I like that. And I agree, though, how are we gonna do that afterwards? But if this is the first step and then can continue this conversation to see how we can save it. And it's already in your easily accessible to bring us that information. I'm not opposed to easily accessible information, even if it may not produce hints of. Councilor Willis?
I guess just a reminder that the budget that did include exactly what you're asking for, so the status quo budget is why we're here looking at alternate plans. So we've had discussions about, well, how could, because there were work groups surrounding a lot of this. Well, what could we do? And that's when Patrick and Amy had the foresight to sit down and try to figure out a way to make it work and still offer library services and some level of museum services. So I guess I would have a difficult time supporting that with no financial resolution built into that. And knowing that we've already looked at that budget, including those services that I love. My kids spent tons of time at the library, sometime at the museum in its previous location. I think it was a whole lot more than $40,000 to get that ADA compliant, ready to really rock as a museum. So I guess I don't see a lot of point in asking Rob to go back and reprint last year's budget with inflationary increases.
I wish my kids got to spend time at the library.
Just when they were little.
But they don't get to go on Saturdays. It's not open on Saturdays. That's as a working parent. We go to Monmouth. I can see the library if I go from my house. I love the library. I believe in the libraries. I believe in everything I haven't said about what a library system is. And so the idea that we're gonna potentially vote to close it, I would love to have a way. Keep it open. I would love to be able to take my daughters to the library that we literally cannot. And so I think I appreciate our directors who have thoughtfully tried to set us up for success in the future. Thinking outside the box. Going into the community. And I think what you were doing is doing strategically about showing our community the value of the museum for those who don't go to it. And when we were able to revisit this conversation again, people will have an understanding of why. And when we look maybe at a levy differently, or look at a fee differently. And so, no, this is not anybody's ideal. I think I appreciate what you have done for services for so many others. And, I get the library, they're a bit of chaos, so that's that, so.
Yes, we do.
So I just appreciate that. I just want to say that, thank you.
I was gonna something very similar to what I said earlier is, I'm not sure it's the best solution to dilute either one of these two by combining it. It may be better to look at these two as separate projects to fund as much as possible the library, to give people the ability to read and access. I mean, I've said this before, this library is not any other library. This is a library you can go in and you can get a backpack and learn how to read and sit, even if you don't have a parent at home that can teach you these things. And so this library is very, very, very important. So I think the library, as much as I love the museum, and I do, the library should probably be on the forefront of our list of priorities. Charlie?
So of course, everybody's picked up on which way I'm going with this. I mean, wasn't slick. I just want to stress that this is kind of the last opportunity. This budget meeting, this series of budget meetings is it. This is really it. If we lose the library hours, we lose the museum, it's gone. It doesn't just come back. Money doesn't grow on trees. We know that. If we don't do something now, if we don't at least leave open the opportunity for us to do something now, then there will be no opportunity to do that in the future. So what I'm requesting is simply a review, and I want to make sure that everybody's clear on that. This is just to get the financials, that's not any sort of motion to raise fees or anything like that. This is just so that we have the information in front of us in case we can come up with a solution over the next week or two. If we don't do that, then council has no option to raise the budget later. If we do end up raising the budget now, council can always underspend. That's okay, as far as I understand, correct? Okay, but we can't overspend. So there's no way to do this if we don't at least leave that window open, and it hurts us none to leave that window open. So that's my argument in defense of at least looking into this.
My understanding from what I've heard from the directors is that that's exactly what they're doing, is leaving it open in the work that they're doing. I think it's a great idea. I mean, I love your idea to do the mobile exhibits. The fact of the matter is that there's just not enough money, right? We put a levy on the ballot, and the community voted to not fund the levy.
And I fought against
That is the bottom line. So I think the city is doing the best that they can with the situation that they have. And sure, it's nice to see those alternative numbers. But to what end? Like, there's not something that can be done about it now, and that doesn't mean that we can't do anything about it in the future. They're gonna keep, the services still alive. They're still gonna continue to do the community outreach. That's crucial to keep those services alive in the community's heart. But it's something that's gonna be revisited again next year, right? Maybe they land some really great grants, and next year there's gonna be more money. So it's not like this is a one and done, and then there's no more library and museum forever.
Right.
This is just a single fiscal year, and this is, they're operating to the best of their capacity with the constraints that we have financially.
Sure, and I would like to remind that we are talking about just the request for information right now, proposal. We're not going into the library special period of it. There's like, do we want our staff to work on that and create that right now and present that to us, or do we want to say we've had that information, we can look at last year's budget and see it, and we don't want them to work on that. So that's our question right now, and that's what we need to vote on.
And we have a motion on the floor.
So is there any more discussion on that? All right,
I just like to reiterate, I don't think it's right to ask the staff to do that work without also giving them the other part of the solution, which is balancing the budget. So if we're gonna have them do the work, we should have the other people will at the same time.
well, I would say also that if we're gonna present that, then it's our job as budgeting to find that solution. That's our job. That's why we're here. That's the point of this.
Gonna take a vote.
Are you ready?
I think we're ready to vote.
Member Parkman?
Nay.
Member Morton? Aye. Member Praskovich?
Nay.
Member Roden? Aye. Member Waber?
Nay.
Member Sherman?
Aye.
Member Source?
Aye.
Then aye.
Aye.
Member Seiler?
No.
Member Ford?
Nay.
Member Christensen?
Nay.
Member Martin?
Nay.
Member Porter?
Nay.
Member Schwarzer? Member, Sheriff Garrison?
Aye.
Motion fails.
Yeah, 9 days.
So. All right. So now we're discussing the budget. For the news service, are there any questions for that?
One quick thing that I failed to mention before we take questions, I'm sorry. In the budget message that was read last week, that talked about the library closing today, that was brought up by all of you, thank you. No, we don't know what day that is gonna be, but I've been asked to remind everyone that that won't happen until after summer reading. So we're looking at end of August, beginning of September for that to take effect, so. And with that, questions?
So our exhibit will be in the attic. for lack of better terms, third floor here. If someone is doing a research project or writing a book, can they pay to have access to something that's in storage, or is it just absolutely not until we identify the space?
Because of its location, I can't physically take them to the collection. However, that's a part of what I do now, all the time, genealogical research. Making collections available to researchers that are doing books, and they could come to me and I could pull it, but. Yeah.
It's because it's in a secure portion of the building.
I figured that was the answer.
Questions?
Is the question about the closure of the library for an extra day even something that this committee can have an effect on at all, or is it purely operation?
In all honesty, I could operationally close it,
So
but we
it's
listen.
almost kind of a moot point.
Well, but we listen to the community and you all represent the community, so.
Right, we can give our opinion, but it's not something that the budget committee can effectually do with our power.
Correct.
Right.
But you would take our recommendations into consideration.
Never. Of course.
Do we have a back of a napkin estimate on what that thing would be for your services?
Not necessarily relevant.
No, it's because it was packaged with a reduction in staff as well. Wasn't there a reduction?
I didn't think there was no staff.
I misspoke.
No, we just really do,
Sorry.
it's just more, it's utilities, it's facilities, it's a little bit more nebulous than it is a hard and fast number.
Does that seem negligible though? Like in the bigger picture of the budget?
Yeah, I believe that it truly is, but I will tell you what, part of what it's doing is it's getting the community used to the reduced services that we may end up with, because we don't get revenues. It's just not gonna be there. And it would feel less dramatic to them if we had to cut it eventually, which is not what I mean.
I do think. I completely understand what you're saying, is that I think we're in a period of time right now that until the community sees and feels the cuts. They won't actually believe that it happened. I have heard from so many people in the community about the library, and it's already gone through cuts, and if it's a negligible, if it's like a $10,000 saving to reduce the hours for one day versus 100,000, I think that could be worth looking at, because I do think the library is beloved by the community, and there already have been cuts there in the past that people have recommended.
It's not so much showing them what they're missing, but getting. When we forecast,
right,
there are only two options. Unless there's some brilliance out here, there are two options. Find revenue or we cut. Because remember, we're looking at less than $600,000 in contingency. That is not gonna carry our library and our museum next year.
Right.
So it's more, if we reduce a day, it prepares the community for where they may end up having to go. So it is less dramatic.
I don't know, committee for putting that forward, even though it failed. I think as a committee, we have to be very careful that we don't rubber stamp what's in front of us. That's what we did last year. That's what we did the year before that. If we are going to try for long-term solutions, because this budget isn't a long-term solution. If we're gonna try for long-term solutions, then we need to have proactive thinkers put forth ideas that we can all debate and try to get to the best solution possible. If not, what's the point of us being here if we're not gonna listen to anybody bring forth any changes to the current budget?
I think it's irresponsible to say we rubber stamped the budget. We did not rubber stamp the budget.
We most certainly did.
Most of it, we did not.
We're all entitled for. Certainly, I feel like I'm being singled out.
Were there any more questions? Did we miss any in the library?
Is there a plan to reintroduce the option of a levy in the future?
At this point in time, the council has not directed us to take a look at the levy. I will tell you, I am out about in the community. And I get that question a lot, and I do have people that say that if they understood what they know now, they might vote different. But I don't see 10,000 people.
I would like to see it again in the future.
But, thank you, Chair. I think part of the challenge is there's a lot of mixed messaging in the community about what the levy did and did not do. And that's part of the frustration I have here right now, because I think there are people purposely confusing people about the levy. But what I will say is, I think I appreciate that the city staff strategically in past cuts have worked with the city of Monmouth to try to figure out ways to ensure that families, citizens have access to a library. So if we're gonna cut a day again, do we know if the city of Monmouth is having conversations about additional cuts? Are there ways to maximize and ensure that amongst our two cities, there'll be access to the library?
So as we did the last time, we'll be talking with Monmouth and coordinating. I mean, it's reasonable to think that there may be a day that isn't covered if both the cities end up with budgetary issues. Just because they're both general fund.
I would, can I follow?
Yes.
I would encourage, city staff and, city of Monmouth staff to have conversations with the university too. And find ways to see how the university could also leverage, to ensure that families aren't left behind. We're talking about access to libraries and access to cooling centers, et cetera, et cetera. Because, it's just not, we can't allow, we have to have these services for.
Sorry, one more. I know we talked about like emergent services a lot with Monmouth across other departments. But is it worth talking to Monmouth about merging with the library and bringing it somewhere closer to the center in the, in the future? As collections, having one centralized location for a library. Our cities are only 2 miles apart. It doesn't make sense to me, like, we could cut out all of the operational costs since there's only one, and then we're splitting that between another city. I know that's a really big discussion, feasibility study, but very far down the line, but.
Sounds like a district, and there has been discussion in the public, the communities about a district. Not necessarily the cities, I think you've heard more than I have.
Yeah, so I'm not aware of any joint municipal district. I can do some research and get back on that, but districts, I mean, we're a part of the consortium that we're a part of, and Silver Falls is a library district. It's not the Silverton City Library, it's a district library. And so, I mean, that's a whole process that we've looked at, and I know that members of our Friends of the Library and even our advisory board have been part of discussions about how would that look and how does that happen, but it is a 3 to 5 year realistic process to get that in place.
Yeah, and definitely thinking like further down the line, but we're not expecting to see a huge increase in revenue in the next couple of years. So just starting to think about like, okay, well, if we're gonna have to continue to make cuts, and we unfortunately the cuts happen in what is considered the non-essential services. It just makes sense to think about other options. Nobody wants to see the library cut. I think everybody can agree about that. But we still have to figure out a way to pay.
Thank you. A voice we're not hearing from is the city's advisory boards. We have a library advisory board, we have a museum advisory board, and these are folks who look at operations, they look at support, they look at all kinds of things. And I've been trying to push on council to give them more authority, more to speak for their institutions. I would like to include them in our budget discussions and have either the chairs from both the boards or vice chairs or some representative from the boards come and speak to us about their concerns about the director's plan and possibly any other impacts that we're not thinking of. That's something that's reasonable.
I will just say historically, that's come from our directors. So our directors bring forward what they hear, they implement that through our process. That's historically what we've done.
I understand that, but they speak for the community. And there are community representatives from the library and the museum, and I'd like to hear from them. I think they have something to offer that may be either in support of or in addition to.
There's public comment.
I'm sorry.
Public comment.
Okay,
Yeah, they'll be able
let's
to.
do it that way then. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Sorry, I think, committee member Porter touched my question, which was actually, he was talking about library district. And I was going to ask, go down a similar path, because I come from a city that has a library district. And it's actually it's countywide, so, you know, to what extent, you know, how we had a conversation with Polk County. As that seems a little bit more feasible in terms of its, you know, encompassing the county, and a number of small cities. And providing great access, but again, I know that is a much bigger conversation and not one for tonight, but.
We need to get her a microphone.
Yeah.
Yes, can't hear
Right, are there any further questions for the community services?
Thanks, guys. So really quickly, then I will kind of, we already talked about the Parks Department, so I'm on page 61. Just real quickly here, the pool. Somebody asked, why are we all zeroed out this year? It's not because we've already gotten rid of the pool. It's because we moved the $2,000 or whatever it was into the Parks Department budget. They're just, that way we just don't have to continue to maintain this department from an accounting perspective. On page 62, then, this is the non-departmental piece of the general fund. All that is here is the debt service on the library mortgage, I'm sorry, the museum building. And that is basically those first two lines for a total of about $73,000. The transfer to the building repair and replacement fund is listed there at $100,433. That's impacted by the amendment we talked about last week. The transfer to the urban renewal debt service fund, this is the general fund share of the debt service on this building. And then the contingency is affected by the two amendments. That the one last week and the one that I told you about a little bit ago that I do need a motion on tonight.
That's where you need that.
Yep, and if, and so, Chair Garrison has some verbiage for a motion, so if she can read that and somebody could maybe motion it. Move
And these are
it.
just like accounting line items.
Yeah.
Like they were misplaced in accounting. All right, so I need someone to make a motion to move to amend the proposed budget to decrease the general fund beginning balance by 360,000 and reduce the general fund contingency by 360,000.
Second.
Right, the source. Silent.
Okay.
Second.
I have a question. Why are we, explain this to me again, why are we decreasing the ARPA contingency when you already said it's really, really low again?
Because there was a Scrivener's error in terms of the $360,000 public safety fee was accounted for in the estimated revenue, both in the general fund, regular revenues, general revenues, and in the police department revenues. It should not be in both places.
Thank you for the clarification.
Chair Garrison. Aye. Member Swartzler. Aye. Member Porter.
Aye.
Member Martin Willis.
Aye.
Member Christensen.
Aye.
Member Ford.
Aye.
Member Silent.
Aye.
Member Swords.
Aye.
Member Sharman.
Aye.
Member Boisvert.
Aye.
Member Roden. Aye. Member Haraska.
Aye.
Member Morton. Aye. Member Hartman.
Aye.
Thank you all very much for that.
We just take care of it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great. And so this is the motion to deal with the bank fees in whatever building department.
Yeah, building department.
It's like whatever
I'll read it.
department
I'll
that,
read it.
thank you.
Say, we need to move to amend the proposed budget to increase the building department bank fee by 6,000 and reduce the contingency in the general fund by 6,000.
And the
Second.
Okay. I heard short yeah. Discussion.
We're expecting that the fees to go from 3,000 to 6,000.
With the increased development activity, it's saved. We won't spend it all if we don't need it.
Discussion.
Member Harkinen.
Aye.
Member Morton.
Aye.
Member Praskovich.
Aye.
Member Roden. Aye. Member Blair.
Aye.
Member Sharman.
Aye.
Member Source.
Aye.
Member Siler.
Aye.
Member Ford.
Aye.
Member Christensen.
Aye.
Member Martin Willis.
Aye.
Member Porter.
I,
Member Schwarzman. Aye. Chair Garrison.
Um,
And thank you very much. And thanks for the catch. Appreciate it. And that wraps up our discussion of the general fund. So, I guess at this point, what's the favor of the committee? Do we want to just continue to go through the other funds that we have? Or
Remember, we also do that, right? Or we
we have to open the URA meeting. We can simply open it and recess it to the next week, but we do have to open it because we said we would. What's the flavor of the committee at this point?
I would like to reopen the URA, close that, let people go home, put babies to bed.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, we have.
Right,
to
no,
look-
no, we just want to-
So, we would get to recess this one
Yes.
and then we'll open the next one and.
That's it.
So is, so we need to get a motion to recess.
Motion to reset.
Wow, everybody moved and everybody seconded.
You guys did a great job presenting, and I think it'd be good for us to get some time to think about it. So I think the recess is approved right now. So who called that?
Praskovich.
What's this?
Second.
Second.
I second.
Roden,
Thank you.
discussion. All right.
Okay. Chair Garrison.
Aye.
Member Schwartzler. Aye. Member Porter.
I,
Member Martin Willis.
Aye.
Member Christensen.
Aye.
Member Ford.
Aye.
Member Siler.
Aye.
Member Source.
Aye.
Member Sharman. Member Blair.
Aye.
Member Roden. Member Praskovich. Member Morton.
Aye.
Member Harkinen.
Aye.
Okay,
Excellent.
All right.
so we're closed at 9:09.
Yes. All right.
Now do we need to move to open the UR?
Yeah. we're- we'll do it.
But you can just open it.
Yeah. We are gonna reconvene the rural renewal district meeting. And
You can just.
roll call as well.
No, well, there's no motion to reopen the meeting. We're just
Yeah,
reopening
so-
as scheduled.
Reconvene the
Reconvene
meeting.
as-
I think you can dispense with roll call because everybody's here. And then you can, now you can either choose to discuss urban renewal or you can move to recess to next week.
I move to recess till next week.
that would be Roden and Praskovich.
Discussion.
Can I just do it all in favor this time?
Yes.
Opposed?
No.
It's unanimous.
All right.
Thank you all. Thanks for talking.